shoot you, then there must be at least 2 people in the audience who must come out to save me, because they believe that I am a life which is worth saving. And I think this is what we talk about. I mean, we have almost more than 40% of our patients who come to us, 2/3 of our patients actually who come to us, they come to us only through references of existing patients. And we monitor that very closely, and we see how many patients are giving references, because when a patient gives you references, not only does it come to you at no cost, but it also is goodwill that you are encashing. So how much of goodwill are we creating in the kind of treatment that we are doing? That's one way of measuring it, because people can, we tried everything. People fill in form, sometimes staff fill in the wrong form. If you do it electronically, somebody else says yes. I mean, there are lots of things can go wrong. So the best thing that we believe is start measuring customer advocacy. We have maintained in whatever we have done, professional and financial transparency. I'm happy to tell Mr. Handa, if he's still here, I can't see him from behind this pillar, but in 40 years of my practice, we've never taken a cut from any doctor and not given a cut to any doctor or to any healthcare or any diagnostic company. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my own company is to build a value-based company, because it's not very easy to build a value-based company, especially with young people. We get young doctors who are 27, 32 years old. They want quick money, they want to grow fast. And I always tell them that if you want to do that, go to the stock market. Don't use medical, treatment as a profession. It's not something that you can do so easily. You have to build up goodwill. It takes minimum period of 10 years to build up medical goodwill, and much longer. And therefore, you have to be very patient. I mean, I'm happy to say that we have no cash dealing in our company, to such an extent that we have, and right from the start of my practice, we lose properties because there's a cash dealing. So you will see in our 130 odd clinics that we have a lot of ownership in West and South, but we have very little ownership in the North, because that's the trend there. In the North, people ask for cash money, so we don't own any clinic in the North. Very few clinics in the North, not any, but very few clinics in the North, and we rent them out on long-term leases of 9 years or 12 years. So that's the model that we follow. We also have professional transparency. We have no prescriptions which are coded. The medicine is given directly, so all doctors know what they are prescribing, and so on and so forth. Establish measurable KRAs. I think everybody does it, but how do you do it for doctors? I think that's a challenge, and we overcome that. We made doctors accountable. I think if doctors are not accountable, because what happens is, I've seen that in 40 years of practice, and with 13 years of running a corporate, a doctor will say that my job is to see a patient. Anybody comes, I prescribe. That's it, and then my job is over. But what about patient satisfaction? What about patient advocacy? What about how about measuring the outcome of the patient? What value did you bring to his life? How about measuring the HRQL? Have you actually changed the quality of human life in what you've done or not? So we measure all this, and we have systems which are very measurable, and on this basis they then get their appraisal for the next year. So which is why that becomes an important thing. International protocol again is very important to standardize treatment outcomes. This is a kind of a SAS score which we have developed, which is for skin patients. Just like how you have a burn score, this is a score that we developed with our dermatologists and with some international dermatologists. And it works very well for us because, for example, in a psoriasis patient, you can actually measure this and you can come to know whether the percentage and the things of lesions have actually gone down or not. So this is, and then you have a graph which can actually tell you what is the computer gives you the graph and tells you what is the kind of progression that you've made in that particular disease. Like I said, and like Keval said again in his talk, that if you don't look after your patient and if you're not patient-centric, I think there's no scope for you in the future. Patients are now becoming more and more demanding. They're becoming more restless. They're becoming more militant. This whole theory of saying that doctor was God is today now all over, and they all think of you as a commercial entity, and they want to be a partner in progress, and therefore they want to ensure that you actually share with them, the outcome of treatment and what is going to happen. They are all well read, and that's again a future challenge that we are going to have. So I think measuring patient satisfaction through a system is really very, very important, and we do it through 2 or 3 ways. One is for the last about 6 years we have an American company which sends mystery customers, and we then rate it, and again in the software there is a way of taking a second opinion. So if somebody is not happy, it gets recorded here, automatically it flashes up, and then there's a senior team of doctors who sit at the back end, and they start viewing the patients, and then they can then invite them also for a live video conferencing with the patient at our cost. So to see that patients really get good outcomes. This is how we do the monitoring with mystery audit. So we get ratings like this, and everything we see, whether the air conditioning is perfect, whether the entry was perfect, whether the signboard was lit, whether the patient was comfortable, whether the doctor treated him well, whether the support staff treated him well. And that research has actually shown that the best patient satisfaction that you get is with a general practitioner. And therefore, why do we say that? Because the GP is a one single point of contact. He receives you, he gives you medicine, he sees you to the door. In any institution, there is a multiple point of contact. And whenever there is a multiple point of contact, the patient satisfaction goes down. Because you could always have some security guy who is rude to you. You can have some cashier who doesn't bill on time. Or you got a front desk who's talking on the phone. So the challenge becomes more and more as you get into institutional based practice and healthcare as compared to single individual practices. Homeopathy today is the second largest system of medicine in the world, and because we are talking about globalizing it today, I just want to give you some basic figures. It's practiced in 80 countries legally. The global market today is about 26,000 crores. It's going to grow to 52,000 crores, which is going to double, because homeopathy is growing at 25% back to back for the last 5 years in all over the world. The Indian market is 2,700 crores. The French market is 2,500 crores, and the German market is 693 crores. So again, people think that homeopathy came from Germany and therefore it's very popular there. It is, but it's the third largest, and India also has the largest number of homeopaths in the world, and that's a kind of a strength that we can use even in the healthcare system in the country. It has got 500,000 homeopathic doctors today, out of which unfortunately only 1 lakh are practicing. 100,000 doctors are practicing homeopathic doctors in the country. So I think if I was to look at globalizing challenges, what would they be? I think the first challenge is to develop international partnerships. This is not very easy because sometimes in healthcare there's a different kind of a mental makeup that is required. A partner will say, I want quick returns. Like I said, in healthcare you need at least 10 years startup time to actually get some returns, because unless you get goodwill created, unless you become ambassadors of good health, people are not going to come to you. So it's not very easy, and we've also had some very challenging times when we developed international partnerships. I first started a clinic in 1996 in Mauritius. One day I get a call from my partner over there saying, Dr. Batra, can you come to Mauritius? I said, yes. I go there. He says, I just want to introduce you to your new partner, because I have sold all my shares at a profit to the new guy, and the new guy happens to be a politician. So beyond that, there's nothing else you can do. So we've had many challenging things like this. We had a partner in Middle East, and he had a heart attack. He died, and there was nobody else there. We had another partner in Oman, in Muscat. We tied up with actually a hospital, and it was one of the stories that you heard in the papers where he jumped out of the 24th floor of one of the hotels in India when he came here on a holiday. So I'm saying it's always challenging, and unfortunately in some Gulf countries particularly, there's a requirement for a partnership. And so the Gulf partner is 51% and you're 49%. I know there are ways of going beyond that, but we took a decision therefore that we will only partner as of now, only go internationally only if we have 100% ownership. So we today have set up 3 companies, one in Dubai, which manages a Dubai business where we have 100% ownership, one in England which manages a Harley Street clinic, also 100% ownership, where we have no partners. We now have a third vertical, because when we wanted to open a new clinic in another part, Jumeirah of Dubai, which was the upmarket part, they said no, the old company cannot do, because that's for DHCC, Dubai Healthcare City. We have to open a new company. So we today have a third company. So which means a certain amount of minimum investment goes in every company. So I think that's a challenge, and I think every country has its own rules, and every country wants you to bring in a certain amount of capital to their country. Managing distance and time zones, I think is really a challenge in many ways. Crisis situation. We had a very interesting story. One of our young guys was a call center guy, and we promoted him to kind of a front desk office in Dubai. He bought a new car, a sports car, very flashy, very happy with it, put it on his Facebook, showed it out to everybody. After 1 month, he got drunk, banged the car, and got arrested by the police. So we had to pay 1 million rupees to get him out of jail on bail, and that's how it works. So I think you can have a crisis situation anytime, anywhere, and I think the biggest challenge really is, other than the financial challenge, because on one side you earn in dollars and in pounds, but then you also invest in dollars and in pounds. So the investments are much higher for any other global company, and with the Indian rupee going down, it becomes more and more challenging. I think that the biggest challenge that we have faced all over is following stringent regulatory norms. I think every country has its own norms for healthcare, and they're not easy at all. It has taken us almost 1.5 years to register our products in Dubai with the government. We took about 6 months to start a Dubai healthcare city. We are today the only company over there. But because we are process driven, they have a method of following Harvard protocols, which fortunately we've been following. So it was easy for us to get licensing there. We have invested in Jumeirah for the last 16 months, and till today our clinic hasn't started, because we are still fighting for the last license, which we should get as we speak in the next few days. So I think everything has got a different thing. Like for example, in Dubai, we cannot even send a single communication to a patient unless it is vetted by the Dubai Healthcare City separately and by the Ministry of Health separately. There are 2 regulatory bodies which sit on the top to make sure that nothing you can do. I mean, for every advertisement that you carry, every SMS that you send, you have to pay a kind of an amount to get a permission from the government, and that is valid only for 1 month or 2 months, and then again you have to renew it. So there's a license fee that you have to, so it's all very expensive to propagate any new system of medicine or any new product in an international company. Similarly, we have a separate section by law where we have to keep all our medical records. So there's a separate medical record section, and this is the only country in the world where we are not allowed to bring our software to India. So the government has the software. So whatever we enter as a patient history lies with the government. Why? Because in case any patient wants to file a suit against us or a damage claim, we cannot change anything, because the original lies with the government at all times. So you're not allowed to change it, you're not allowed to take it back. The original lies with the government. So I'm saying there's lots of restrictions, but having said that, if you are able to put your your systems around it, and you are actually able to work yourself out of it, it certainly is a very paying proposition. I'm happy to say that after 3 years of loss making, our Dubai clinic is the largest single more clinic in which revenue gaining clinic for us in the world. So we're doing extremely well there, which is why we're opening a second one, and we now want to open 10 clinics in the next 2 years, because we see margins going down in India, and we see margins being much better in foreign countries. So which is where we are going to look at for growth. A big challenge for retail health is again getting into malls, properties, spaces, and actually competing with something what I call M-Health. It's like the McDonald's. I mean, you gotta have people, like for example, when I was in Singapore a few days ago looking for a property for a clinic, I found that in every mall you have somebody who's doing foot reflexology, somebody doing a massage, somebody doing Shiatsu. I mean, there are kind of alternative health things coming up everywhere. Now you don't know whether these guys are trained, whether they're not trained, whether any certification is required for them. So I think that's a challenge that we all going to have to face in retail health. You'll have to compete with not necessarily medical but also paramedical people. You'll have something where you just have a nurse sitting there and checking your blood pressure, and that's it, and then prescribing you some medicine. And in India, it's already there. I'm saying today in many places that I visit, the pharmacy is a doctor. When you go to a pharmacy, and you'll find people coming saying, "Abhi mujhe sardi hogi, bukhar hai, mujhe dawai de do. Mujhe doctor ke paas jaane ke liye time nahi." So I'm saying there's going to evolve a new challenge all over the world. One of the biggest challenges that we are facing today as doctors, and I think all over the world it's increasing, is self-medication. And it's really something which is going to affect human lives, because when you start medicating yourself, you're actually causing your body great harm. And today people are trusting less and less doctors, and doctors are busy, they have less time with their patients, so that's why more and more people are medicating themselves. And I think to make sure that people take the right kind of medicine is always going to be a huge challenge. And it's going to keep on increasing. Information available on internet. I mean, today a guy reads on internet something. I want to say categorically that all information available on the internet is not necessarily true. I mean, as a doctor, let me tell you that there are a lot of things which are not medically correct, and they are put on the internet in some of the best websites in the world, but they are not medically correct. But patients will read it and then they'll come and question you and say, no, but I read on this site, it said this. I mean, a doctor has gone in so much of learning, so much of experience, and I think, you still go to the internet and you ask for answers and you don't, and then you question the doctor. So I think the doctor will have to be in any case very well informed. He'll have to have a communication with his patient. Is going to have to increase hugely. Corporate citizenship and corporate responsibility, now the government has made it compulsory, and they want 2% to be given for that. We started this again in the year 2000. Every city where we are, we run one free clinic. We also work with old age homes all over the country. Every city is attached with one NGO, or with a blind school, or with animal hospitals, and free health camps we do. So we have a 1% formula, unlike all other formulas. We make sure that for the foundation, we do not pay anything to any of our doctors. They go on their own, they spend their own pocket money to take taxis to go to those places. We don't pay them for lunch, we don't give anything to them. We believe that it's a great education, not for reaching out to other people, but also to us. Because as doctors, we see so much of pain and suffering that over a period of time we become insensitive. And I think it's one of the things that I insist that every doctor has to do some kind of NGO activity so that he can realize how fortunate he is and how people suffer. And I still remember that, a very, very touching image which has, stayed in my mind. We are still working with that NGO. There's an Anurag old age home, and any of you go to Hyderabad or come from there, please visit it. There's one single man who supports people. It's an old age home, and I remember going there, and one old couple, must be 75, 80 years old, couple together, husband and wife, abandoned by their children, and sitting on one trunk, because that is the only worldly possession that they have, and they are protecting it, so strongly. I mean, it's an eye opener, and like that I can give you hundreds of stories of all over things that actually move me and also doctors. So I think it is something that we should all look at. Finally, I'd like to end with, and I know that you all have discussed the other part of it, but I still want to mention this. A little bit of it was touched by my predecessor, but I want to still talk about it. It was Mayo, the founder of Mayo Clinic, who says, and I want to quote him, "The aim of medicine is to prevent disease and prolong life. The ideal of medicine is to eliminate the need of a physician." And therefore I say to all of you today that the objective of medical practitioners must not be to profit from disease. Ultimately, our attitude towards medicine is defined by what we consider our goal. Do we want more doctors, more medicines, and more hospitals, or simply less disease? In my opinion, this is one case where definitely less is more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukesh, for giving a very insightful presentation and taking us ahead for all.